Hello, my people. It is always good for us to read our history. And before we went into captivity, we were told to read. We were told to teach it to our children, to teach it to them when they wake up, when they go to bed at night, when they're walking along the way. The purpose and the reason for us to read was so that we could be able to have examples of righteousness and have examples of people who were evil or people who were lawless and how we handled those things and how the behaviors of those type of people, how they act, so we can be able to detect those situations and those people. The other thing that was important for us to know our history is so that we can understand how the nations would rise against us, the reasons in which they would rise against us, and the plans, the many, many, many multiple plans that they instituted in order to try to wipe us out. Though they could not wipe us out, though they massacred and murdered many of us during the time of our exile when we were cast out of the land and the Most High allowed them to come in and spoil us and burn our houses and take all of our treasures and our possessions and just everything that we had and would leave us bare. If we would try to continue what we were taught by our ancestors to read, then we would be more aware of when we are under attack, because we don't read today. We don't understand or comprehend when we are under attack, and we don't understand and comprehend when a nation is rising against us and they are ready to do whatever is necessary within their means to try to cut us off of the face of the earth forever. One other reason that it's important for us to be able to read and learn of those examples is because we will find that even in our captivity, and we have had many captivities due to the fact that we fell into iniquity a number of times, and we began to worship other gods and practice all kinds of wicked, evil sacrificing to idols and different things like that, which was a crime under our law. So generally, the nations that we went into captivity under would take all our books or burn all of our books, and they would make sure that we had no books that we were told and instructed to read so that we would know the history, our history, and also the history of the world and other and great important information that we need to know in order so that we would be some highly intellectual individuals, of which our people were very highly intelligent. And because of the wisdom and the knowledge and the understanding that was within our books, we were sought out also for our wisdom, our counsel, and our advice. So anyway, I'm going to read a story also regarding when we were in captivity under the Greeks, when they conquered Darius. We went under occupation of the Greek Empire And then we ended up, from them, we ended up under the Roman Empire. And King James, who gave us his little teeny bitty book, they left out anything regarding the Greek Empire and what happened and how they came against us. And they left out anything almost about the Roman Empire, and they just left a little bitty tidbit about what was going on in terms of like we were under occupation of Rome during the time when before Judea was besieged. And so they really didn't tell you anything in that area about the Roman Empire at all. And then, but what they did is they tricked us in the New Testament. And if you go into the book of Acts, the individuals who were the so-called bishops, they put us under a church system, which was not Yahweh's system, but it was the system of the nations of the world, because Christianity and Catholicism was way before, you know what I'm saying? So they gave us their religion, which was Christianity and Catholicism, and the captains and the soldiers and the lieutenants who were the individuals involved in our mass murder and enslavement. You will find those same lieutenants and sergeants written in the book of Acts as some kinds of bishops or whatever over the churches, you know what I'm saying? So we've been hoodwinked and we've been bamboozled. And many times when we have went under a occupation, those leaders who destroyed us forbid us to follow our laws. Many of our people, they rather fought and they died. So they did, many fought and many died and were killed and massacred because they fought, and many refused to apostatize and give up the way of our faith in the Most High, who had forsaken us because we had forsaken him, who had hated us because we hated him. We hated his ways and we didn't want to follow him, he became his indignation, and his wrath was poured out on us through the nations. And that's how Yahweh works. He rises up nations to chastise his people. And then when our time is up, when our punishment and our chastisement is ended, then he lifts our hand up as the axe and the mighty hammer to subdue nations. And so anyway, so that you may know this history, I will read the first, not all today, but I would read some of the book of the Maccabees, which is our history. That was, I believe, was it in the, I know it was in the Catholic Bible. And I'm not sure whether or not any of the writings were in the King James version. Which one is that? Which one? The 1611 King James version. But anyway, let me read at this particular moment. After Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came from the land of Chittim, had defeated Darius, king of the Persians and the Medes, he succeeded him as king. He had previously become king of Greece, okay, the Grecians, the Greeks. He fought many battles, he conquered strongholds and put to death the kings of the earth. He advanced to the ends of the earth and plundered many nations. When the earth became quiet before him, he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. He gathered a very strong army and he ruled over countries, nations, and princes, and they became tributary to him. After this, he fell sick and he perceived that he was dying. So he summoned his most honored officers who had been brought up with him from youth and divided his kingdom among them while he was still yet alive. And after Alexander had reigned 12 years, he died. Then his officers began to rule, each in his own place. And they all put on crowns after his death, and so did their sons after them for many years. And they caused many evils on the earth. As we are dealing with right now, we are dealing with evil men. We are dealing with lawless men, okay? And the law that we are following is not the law of Yah, because they refuse to let us follow the laws of Yah. So the laws that we are following now, which is Roman civil law, is not our law. The Roman civil law actually goes against the law of the Most High. And in the way that it goes against the laws of the Most High, they teach us to violate his laws. So we are actually violating the Most High laws, and we have exchanged his laws for lawlessness and for evil, corrupt laws that are laden with traps and snares. And they were not written for us, okay? They were written against us. And under military law, we are considered enemy combatants, okay, and prisoners of war. Look it up and do your research. I did mine. My background, I went to school as a paralegal. I studied criminal and civil procedures, and I've studied laws under the Geneva Convention and many other various different laws and sovereignty laws and all that, those type of laws. But anyway, let me go on further. It says, from them, these evil men, okay, that put on crowns, okay, during the time after Alexander's death, they were very evil men. And they caused much evil in the earth. And what they mean by that, they taught people evil ways. Through their laws and different things, they forced by law people to sacrifice to devils, to do killing, to do murder and everything, to murder the innocent, to rob and steal, even through the use of laws. So it says, from them came forth a simple root. So when you have a government that through law teaches wickedness and corruption to the people and incorporate into the law and force you to do profane things and things that go against the Most High, there is a great deal of evil that comes up in the earth. So this, what we're dealing with today, is not new. It is not new. So from them came forth a sinful root, okay? Because what you put in to individuals in different things like that, you are planting seeds of wickedness. So while we are here and across the world, we are being implanted with seeds of wickedness. And the laws that we follow are not righteous laws, but the laws we follow are corrupt laws. You know what I'm saying? But considering the fact that we didn't want to obey the Most High, and we lived in iniquity, he rose up the nations around us to use as chastisement against us, and we were driven out of the land, and we became a prey and a spoil. And we are in that state and condition today, and we are looking for, at this particular time in our life, for the redemption. So that's what we look for redemption. So anyway, a sinful root of them rose up from them. And it said Antiochus Epiphanes. He was a son of Antiochus, the king. He had been a hostage in Rome. He began to reign in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. Now, there's one thing to understand also about Rome, that Edom, Esau's descendants, which they call the Idumeans, also were in joint partnership with the Europeans in Rome. and establishing the papacy, whatever, in Rome. And so actually the descendants of Esau began ruling over us in Jerusalem and the other cities and towns that we had throughout the land when we went into various different captivities and different things, They also fought against us due to the jealousy. The descendants of Ishmael fought against us due to the jealousy. The sons and daughters of Keturah also fought against us due to the jealousy. And they joined hand in hand with the children of Japheth to come against us. So anyway, let me continue on. It says, in those days, lawless men, and Lord, even now. In those days, lawless men came forth from Yisreal, from us, okay? You know what I'm saying? Because, they were being commanded by these kings and officers and everything to go against the ways of the Most High. So anyway, so among us came up many lawless men, and many of these lawless men among us were the ones that was in the political arena among us, because we had a court system, we had a legal system and different things like that, where we judged matters, but we had corruption within our court. Okay, so in those days, lawless men came forth from Yisreal, from us, and misled many of us, our ancestors, should I say, because I wasn't there during that time. And they said, let us go and make a covenant with the Gentiles. That's all the other nations. We're not Gentiles. It said around about us, for since we separated from them, many evils have come upon us. The proposal pleased the people because what did you have? You had a lot of folk that were scared. You know what I'm saying? They were scared of the Greeks or whatever and what the Greeks would do. So many people, like I said, when they get scared, they be like, hey, if we can't beat them, we better join them. You know what I'm saying? Let's deliver ourselves unto them. So the evil people among us who is probably getting bribed or whatever, in order to do what they did, they misled the people. They lied to the people. They became very deceitful, and they made a proposal, and that proposal pleased those scary folk. And it said, and some of the people eagerly went to the king because they probably thinking about, oh, I don't want to die, and my kids, whatever, like we are today. And many people are going along with this evil that is taking a hold of the earth right now out of fear. Fear will do some terrible things to you, you know what I'm saying? And fear will even make a fool out of you and make you make some very foolish decisions. So it says, and some of the people eagerly went to the king, and he authorized them to observe, listen to this, to observe the ordinances of the Gentiles. So I want to have you know, we are not observing any of the righteous laws of the Most High. We are observing, and we have been taught to observe the corrupt ordinances of the Gentiles, of all the nations, which our people were called uncircumcised, nations or whatever. The wicked nations that worshipped all types of idol gods. And when I say Europeans are not the only ones who were worshiping that, idol gods or whatever, but anyway, I shall move on. It says, so they built a gymnasium. Listen to this. They built a gymnasium in Jerusalem, and the place behind me that you see is the original Jerusalem, and what you see behind me is the original temple. All the land that you see around it used to be where the city of Jerusalem was, you know what I'm saying, before it was destroyed, burned to the ground, robbed, pillaged, and spoiled. Many strangers lived into the land. And this is the end result of what you see right now. This land that you see behind me is awaiting for our return in our exodus back home. And it shall lay, according to prophecy, it shall lay waste and be a wilderness until we return. So no one lives there in that area as we speak right now. It says, so they built, but one thing I will say is that the other descendants and parties who were working against us, and their descendants working against us, which is the Rockefeller Foundation. Rockefeller Foundation had came over to this particular area in 1967, somewhere in there, and they began to try to build up the water channels in this particular area because the water channels were broken down in the area because the water came out the side of the temple and ran down Mount Zion into the Gihon Spring, which was below. And due to all of the wars and the fightings, they cut off the water, because there was a lot of water wars. So what they also did is they cut off the water ways that would come into this particular area so that you would have that spring that would run around Zion. And that there behind me is the threshing floor. This also had ended up becoming a Jebusite city. And also this here area was also called Salem. And the reason it was called Salem because there was a real king of Salem called Melchizedek, and he was a priest of the Most High Yahweh. Okay, because there were priests even before there were Hebrews. And we should also understand that Abraham was a Chaldean and lived in the area of Mesopotamia, in the land of Ur. And he was told to leave and separate from his kinsmen who were Chaldeans. And when he separated from his kinsmen, well, his kinsmen also were descendants of Shem, but his name was changed from Abram to Abraham. And from that day forward, when he became a friend of the Most High, he was then called a Hebrew. Now, within the word Hebrew, I would say again, is the word Eber, which means the children of Eber, and Eber was a son of Shem. So anyway, I shall move on. So they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to the Gentile custom, and they removed the marks of circumcision. Okay, that was another law that the wicked evil kings, the mark of circumcision was a mark of the covenant of Abraham. Okay, so they wanted us to forget about the dang on covenant or whatever. We had went into exile. I don't mean exile, but we were under the occupation of the Greeks. We were sold into slavery. So they began to make laws against our laws and everything else and force us to follow those laws, or either you can be put to death, or if you don't follow it, you be put to death. So they wanted us to remove the mark of circumcision. Now, how they did that, I don't know. I guess I would have to look and see how you remove a mark of circumcision, whatever. And they wanted them to abandon, and the people did abandon, just like even now under the government that we are in, they have made us, that was started under the Roman Empire, they have made us to abandon all our holy covenants. And we end up taking on the covenants of our enemies and the oppressors. So we are not following righteousness under the way of Yah. We are following the heathen ways of our enemies. So anyway, so they forced us, those that went along, and there was other ones that said, we just ain't gonna do it. They were willing to fight and to die. And so they rose up and revolted. They fought and died. Some didn't die, you know what I'm saying? They were able to live their days out. But anyways, but they forced us by their law, by their decree, to remove the marks of circumcision and to also abandon our holy covenant. Okay. And when we abandoned our holy covenant, what we did out of fear and out of torture and all these other different things, we then joined with the Gentile nations. And so we are under the Gentile nations right now. And what they do is they teach us all things to violate our covenant, and they have refused for us to even know. So what they did, they kept all that from us, but they keep all of our books, the ones that they didn't burn up. They have those books, they have that knowledge. And we had a host of writings and different things like that. And then many of our history, they have had twist things up, and they had made it as if it was their history, and they had all this knowledge, but it was us. So anyway, they forced us to remove the marks of circumcision and abandon our holy covenant. And many of our people, out of fear of death or whatever, and saying, well, look, I want to live, they joined with the Gentiles and they sold themselves to do evil, as we are doing today. Many of us all have sold ourselves to do evil and to do wickedly, and our laws are designed in order to have us to do wickedly and to violate the Holy Covenant and the laws of the Most High. So anyway, when Antiochus saw that his kingdom was established, he determined to become king of the land of Egypt, that he might reign over both of the kingdoms. So he invaded Egypt with a strong force. He invaded Egypt with chariots and elephants and cavalry and with a large fleet. And he engaged Ptolemy, king of Egypt, in battle. And Ptolemy turned and he fled before him, and many were wounded and they fell to death by the edge of the sword. And they captured the fortified cities in the land of Egypt, and he plundered the land of Egypt. And after subduing Egypt, Antiochus returned in the 143rd year, and he went up against Yisreal. He went up against us. Okay. And when he came against us, the Hebrews, and he came against Jerusalem, and he came with a strong force and a strong army. And I must tell you that when we are in iniquity, the Father will allow a nation to come against us and to bring us into captivity and do whatever kind of evil, murder, whatever it is to us, because we have sinned against him. Okay. So anyway, so he came up against us with a very strong army. When it says strong force, a strong army, and he arrogantly entered the Father. Look, another thing, when we are in iniquity, the Most High always allowed the other nations to defile the temple and take all the things of the sanctuary. So he arrogantly entered the sanctuary and he took all the golden altars. Believe it or not, our possessions and everything are still here. It's just that they are in the hands of Queen Elizabeth. They are also in the hands, in her vault and her treasury, and also in the British museums, and also in the Vatican, and probably many other places. But our scepters and crowns and thrones and all these other different things that we have, they are in their possession, because they carried all these things out and they went and took them into Europe and into Rome. So anyway, so when this Antiochus, this is, we're talking about the Greeks now. So he arrogantly entered the sanctuary, and he took the golden altars, the lampstands for the light, and all of its utensils. He took also the table for the bread of the presence. He took the cups for drink offerings, the bowls, the golden censers, the curtains, and the crowns and gold decorations on the front of the temple, and he stripped it all off. and he took the silvers, and he took the gold and the costly vessels, and he took also the hidden treasures which he found, for we had many treasures. Okay. And it says, and it said, taking them all, he departed to his own land. He committed deeds of murder and spoke with great arrogance. And Yisreal, the Hebrews, our ancestors, they mourned deeply in every community. But the thing about it, were committing iniquity. So it says, and the rulers and the elders, they groaned. Maidens and young men became faint. The beauty of the women, it faded. Every bridegroom took up a lamentation. She who sat in the bridal chamber was mourning, okay? Even the land shook for its inhabitants, and all the houses of Jacob were clothed with shame, okay? And the Father told us in the prophecy that he would make us a laughing stock. Even today, we are still a laughing stock today. And it says, 2 years later, the king sent to the cities of Yehuda a chief collector of tribute. Tributary is a tax that you must pay to the king, who is a ruler over you. So anyway, so we had to pay tributary, which is a tax. And only slaves pay taxes, okay? Only slaves pay taxes, okay? And it said, and he came to Jerusalem with a large force. And it said, deceitfully, he spoke peaceable words to them, and they believed him. But he suddenly fell upon the city, meaning he came with his armies and slew the people of the city, and he dealt it a severe blow. And he destroyed, murdered, massacred many people of Yisreal. And he plundered the city, and he burnt it with fire, and tore down its houses and its surrounding walls. And they, look at it, look, okay, look. And they took a captive of the women and children, and they seized the cattle. One thing that they did do, they took captive of the women and children, and what they did is that those men would sex them up and everything like that, or whatever, chop, whatever, kill, whatever, however, okay? And they seized the cattle. Then they fortified the city of David with a great strong wall and a strong tower, and a strong wall and that strong tower, it became a citadel whereby that they could look over the city. Because if you were here, particular in this area, on this particular hill where the temple was, from that vantage point, you can see all around Jerusalem from this particular vantage point when you come on the temple. Because they resa the temple down to the ground, to the foundation. So what you see is the foundation of the temple right behind me. And if you go into the land, this is what you will see today. And so, and they stationed there a simple people, because generally when we were conquered, they would transport us out, and then they would transport other people of other nations into our land. So, and they stationed there a sinful people, wicked people, corrupt people, a lawless people, okay? Lawless men, lawless women. And these strengthened their position, by force. They strengthened their position in the land and over the people, over our people in the land. And they stored up arms and food, and collecting the spoils, all of our things, all of our possessions and everything. As they collected the spoils of Jerusalem, they stored them there, and they became a great snare. And it said, and it became an ambush against the sanctuary, an evil adversary of Israel continually. On every side of the sanctuary, okay, our temple, they shed innocent blood, okay? This is what you see right here. This place where you see right here, okay? Where even our own priests and everything who were wicked and corrupt, okay, and everything. They were doing all manners of evil on this temple, which was a holy site. But whenever, like I said, we get involved in, whenever we had getting involved in iniquity and sin, the Most High would allow his temple to be defiled. So anyway, but they were murdering, shedding blood, doing human sacrifices right here on the temple. So it became an ambush against the sanctuary, an evil adversary of Yisreal continually. And on every side of the sanctuary, they shed innocent blood, and they even defiled the sanctuary. It says, because of them, the residents of Jerusalem, the ones who wanted to maintain the righteousness within themselves, who were willing to die or whatever, or just rebel or just flee the city because of the wickedness and the corruption there. It says, because of them, all these wicked people and all the wickedness that was going on, those who were righteous, residents of Jerusalem, they fled. And it said that Jerusalem, she became a dwelling of strangers. That means when you say talking about stranger, we're talking about all those nations that were committing wickedness and worshiping other gods and deities and different things like that, and forcing the people to sacrifice to idol gods and all this other kind of yin yang jazz. And it said that Jerusalem herself, she became strange to her offspring and her children, and they forsook her. Those who were righteous among her, they went out to try to flee. And it says, and her sanctuary became desolate as a desert at that time. And her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbath into a reproach. So right now, under the occupation that we are, they had passed laws that we would no more have any of our feasts. They passed laws that we would no longer be regarding the Sabbath day. So the papacy, they end up changing the days to trick the people. So instead of us determining the moon to determine the Sabbath day, what they began to do is to teach us to worship the sun. So they changed the Sabbath day to a Sunday, what they call Sunday, in the Romanized calendar or whatever, which is not our calendar because we were on a lunar calendar. And what they did, they named their day Sunday, and Sunday was in honor of the sun god. So anyway, so the sanctuary itself, it became a reproach, okay? And her Sabbaths is also a reproach. Her honor, there was no more honor. They didn't honor it. You know, they trampled it underfoot, you know what I'm saying? Unto contempt, to the point of they hated it. You know, they hated it. So they hated it. Okay. And what you have to understand is that Yah began to hate his own temple, and he began to hate his people and his land because we had went against him and rebelled against him, and we had joined hand to hand with the wickedness and the evil of the people of the land. So he just kicked us on out there where we wanted to go. Okay, you want to deal with them lovers? You want them as your lover? You want them to be your king? Okay, I'm gonna show you. I'm kicking your behind out there, and I want you to show you what these evil, corrupt kings are going to do to you and to your children. So let's go on. So Jerusalem, she was dishonored now, and grew as great. Her dishonor, her hatred, now grew as great as the glory that she once had. And her exaltation, she was exalted above the earth. Our people were exalted above the earth. Our temple was exalted above the earth, but now it was turned into mourning. Okay, it said, then the king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people. Now, our law said that we were not supposed to join hand in hand with the unclean or the polluted or the nations around us. But the king who had captured and conquered our land, he gave a decree, okay, that we all gonna be one people, okay? We gonna be one people. Just like today, we are forced to try to be one people there and worship all their pagan holidays and the pagan weekdays and the pagan month days and do all these pagan practices. That's what they taught us. So they took away our law, our feasts, and our festivals and everything. And in turn, they forced us and have indoctrinated us to follow all the pagan things that are in violation against the Most High and teach us wickedness. But we think, it's cool, but, hey, that's how it is. And it says, and the king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people and that each should give up his customs, okay? So we were forced to give up our customs, okay? By force, by threat of death, by torture. That's why we don't do our customs today. We have been programmed and we're continuously programmed, of a new way, of a new custom to serve new gods, okay? And that was by all the nations around and about us. That's what they would do. Every time that we acted up, Yahweh kicked us out, and we end up in these situations. So anyway, it says, and that each should give up his customs. Then all the nations around about, of whom we was not to have any dealings with, all the Gentiles, they accepted the command of the king. And it said, many even from Israel, from our own place, from our own people, they accepted the command of the king to give up their customs and their cultures, and to have their children to give up their custom and their cultures. And they gladly adopted the religion. What was the religion? Catholicism, Christianity, and Buddhism, all these many different religions we have adopted. Okay, and we began, and they made us and taught us. Once we adopted the religion and all these different things, we began to sacrifice to idols and profane the Sabbath day. And we began to also sacrifice children, sacrifice virgins on the altars, and burn people on these altars. So anyway, we did that out of fear. Whatever, you know what I'm saying? Because during captivity, people do a lot of things out of fear, thinking that it's going to save their life. That's why I guess it said, when you think you're going to save your life that way, you're going to lose it in hell, okay. So it said, anyway, the king sent letters by messengers to Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, and he directed them, okay? And he directed them to follow customs. Listen, what we are following right now is not our custom, it's corruption. And they taught us how to follow their strange customs of their land, of the nations around about us, which we were forbidden to follow their customs. They gave decrees and everything to force us to follow their strange customs in their lands, okay? We were forced to do that, and we are doing it today. Many of the laws and different things that they're coming down on us are against the Most High's laws. They're given to us by evil and corrupt and lawless men and women. So anyway, they forced us to give up our customs, follow their strange customs, and they forbid the burnt offerings, and they forbid us to do sacrifices, okay, and the drink offerings in the sanctuary, and to profane the Sabbath and all of our feasts. Okay, so all of our feasts. You know what I'm saying? And all of our, we would come to the temples from all about 3 times a year, all of that cut out. Oh, no, You're going to follow our law. You're going to follow our strange customs. You're going to sacrifice, do human sacrifice and all this other thing. You're going to pollute yourselves. So their custom was for us to pollute ourselves, and we are polluting ourselves even today as we speak. And it says that, okay, so they forbid burnt offerings. They forbid the sacrificing of the turtle doves and the animals and all these different things that we had, and the drink offerings in the sanctuary to profane the Sabbath day. Like the heck with the Sabbath day. You ain't gonna be doing no dang rest on no Sabbath day, and you ain't having none of these feasts that y'all was having. And they made us to defile the sanctuary, and the priests were also defiled. Okay. And it said, and to build altars. So they made us, and they built idol altars. They built altars and sacred precincts and shrines for idols to sacrifice swine, pig, which was an unclean animal, and all unclean animals on those altars in the sanctuary and all throughout Jerusalem. This is what happened. And they forced us by their law to leave our sons uncircumcised, okay, to forget about, to do away with the Abrahamic covenant. And they were to, and see, all of this was a process for us to begin to forget the ways and laws of our father. The laws that we follow are not our laws. The laws that we follow are not our way. None of this stuff has anything to do with our custom or the laws that the Most High gave to us. And it was done in order that we forget our law. Their law is not our laws, okay? We were forced, we were indoctrinated and brainwashed to forget our law and follow corruption, okay? So that they should, it said in here, so the reason this was done, so that we and our ancestors should forget the law and change all the ordinances, so that we forget the law and all of the ordinances would be changed and we would not follow them, and we will continue all this time to be in violation to the Most High, to be in opposition against the Most High. And that is where we are today. And we think that we know him, or we think that we're doing something good, but we are in violation of the laws of the Most High. And it said, and whoever does not obey, this is what the king said, and this is what all these nations said whenever we get into captivity, and we are still in it, and we were mass murdered and tortured and everything to follow these things with the Greeks as well as the Roman Empire. And it said, and whosoever does not obey the command of the king shall be killed, shall be murdered, whatever. So many of us was murdered and hung and everything else, murdered, hung, chopped up, whatever, however, whatever and however. And it said, in such words, he wrote to his whole kingdom, okay? It was not only to us, but all the kingdoms that he had conquered. And he appointed inspectors over all the people and commanded the cities of Yehuda. Okay, this is one of our cities right here that we're looking at. The city of Ammon, where they made the second Jerusalem, is one of our cities. And we had many other cities, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, and they commanded the cities of Yehuda to offer sacrifices to all of these idol gods that they had set up in Jerusalem and in all our cities. And they forced us to do it city by city, okay? City by city. And many of the people, everyone who forsook the law, the righteous laws of Yah, because we don't follow them here. We are not following the righteous laws of the Most High. And it said that many of the people, everyone who forsook the law of Yah, which is his laws are righteous, The ones that we have been given by our enemies and by these nations and foreign nations that we are under are corrupt and wicked. They are not righteous laws, but they are corrupt and wicked. So we forsook the Most High's law, and we joined the what is called the heathen nations, or the nations around about, and they did evil in the land, and we are doing evil across the world in all the lands. And they drove Yisreal, they drove our ancestors into hiding, those who wanted to live righteous, those that wanted to keep the law. They drove them into hiding in every place of refuge that they had. Now, the way, the reason the cities are like they are is to make sure that we have no defense cities, that we are wide open, that we are able to be a gap at any time if they want to take us down. You don't have anywhere to go down and hide. You know what I'm saying? Many of the knowledge that we had in order to be able to do that has been stripped from us. So now, as we said, so they drove many of the Israelites out into every hiding place for refuge they had. It said, now on the 15th day of Keslev, in the 145th year, they erected a desolating sacrilege upon the altar of burnt offerings. They also built altars in the surrounding cities of Yehuda. Remember, the prophecy said that you shall, when we go into these captivities, that you shall serve gods that your fathers have never known. You will serve gods that newly come up. You know what I'm saying? And he spoke of all these evil things that will come upon us until we are almost totally wiped out, but not wiped out. Okay, but then he said, then that day, near that time or whatever, we would begin to multiply in the land. We will multiply in the land, okay? And we would become numerous. And then we will be in the midst of our enemies. We will be surrounding them, okay? So anyway, I just want you to know that. And it said, and they also built all, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. And the scripture says that the time is coming that we will remember ourselves in all the lands that we have been in. Now, what I would tell you is that has been occurring, that we are remembering ourselves. Who is causing us to remember ourselves in our history? And it is the Most High, whose word goes out and it does not return unto him void. So anyway, let me go on. And it said, and they also built altars in the surrounding cities of Yehuda, and they burnt strange incense that our father didn't have us burning up in some place, in these places, okay? And then when they was even burning cannabis, they had us burning cannabis, and the Most High had the priests to come in, slaughter and kill all of our wicked people out that was smoking cannabis up in the temple. Okay, anyway, let me move on. And they done taught us to smoke all this stuff. It wasn't for smoking, okay? It wasn't for smoking, but that is in violation. Everything that we do is in violation and is against the Most High law. But we are following the laws of the wicked Gentiles, okay? And it said, and so they began to burn strange incense at the doors of the houses and in the streets. All of our books of the law, do we have them? No, they got them all, most of them. Here lately, within a number of years of maybe, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years, I don't know. But we have been able to get access to some of those books of ours, okay? So anyway, it says the books of the law, our books that we were supposed to read all the time, continually, so that we would be able to keep the law. You know what I'm saying? So we'd be able to keep the law. You know what I'm saying? And know about our history, to know about our family, our lineage, what happened, you know, from the beginning. So the books of the law, which these governments and these kings and everything, they found. They tore our books and different things in pieces, and they burnt them to fire. Many people who were escaping went and tried to hide many of our books and different things in the earth. But when these inspectors and these officers came in and they found that we were still holding on to our books of the law, they found them, they tore them to pieces, and they burnt them up. And it says, where the books of the covenant was found, when the books of covenant was found in anyone's possession, or if anyone adhered to the law, if anybody was following the law, the decree of the king was to condemn him and put him to death. Okay, so we are not following any righteous laws right now. We are following the laws of wickedness and corruption. And it said, and they kept using violence against our people, Israel, and against those found month after month in all of our cities. And on the 25th day of the month, they offered sacrifice on the altar which was upon the altar. They offered unclean, polluted animals on the altar of burnt offerings. And according to the decree, they put to death the women who had their children circumcised, and their families, and those who circumcised them. And they hung the infants from their mothers' necks. But many in Yisreal, they stood firm and were resolved in their hearts not to eat unclean food. But one thing that now, that was then and now, we have been put in a position to eat all kinds of unclean food. There is nothing clean that we have. Our enemy had made sure that we do not receive any clean food. Our food is corrupt. Our water is corrupt. Everything that we have is corrupt. It's unclean. But guess what? It may be unclean, but we're still alive. You know, many of us have died down through the ages. We have been given all different types of diseases, and you wonder why we either have the highest rate of sickness and disease. That's by design. Okay. Because the Most High, when he kicked us out of his land, he said that we would have more of diseases than they even had in Egypt, that was placed on Egypt because of our iniquity. Okay, but he's going to pardon. Don't ask me when or whatever. And we're going to exit up out of here. I don't know if I'll live to see the day, but anyway, the Father's word go out and it does not return unto him void. So anyway, and it says, and their families and those who circumcised them, and they hung the infants. They murdered them, and they hung the infants from their mothers' necks. I mean, they hung them, they killed them, hanging them on the mother's necks. It says, but many in Yisreal stood firm, and they were resolved. They saw all this. They wanted you to see all that was going on, to put fear in your heart. You know what I'm saying? That you would sin against the Most High. And many did, you know. So anyway, and then there were many who just resolved in their hearts, I'm not going to eat anything unclean. I'm not going to do this and that. You know what I'm saying? And it said, and they chose to die and be murdered rather than to be defiled by food or to profane the holy covenant, and they were murdered. Okay. And very great wrath came upon Yisreal. Absolutely. All right. It says, and in those days, Mattathias, the son of John, son of Simeon, and priest of the sons of Jorab, they left Jerusalem and they settled because of all the wickedness that was going on in there. And they settled in Modein, Modein. And this Mattathias, he had 5 sons. John, surname Geda, Gaddi. Simon, called Thessa, Thassi. Judas, called Maccabeus. Eleazar, called Averim, Avarim, Avaran, and Jonathan, called Aphus, Apphus. He saw the blasphemy being committed in Judah and Jerusalem. Let me make this statement right here. Based upon the nation that had our writings to be transcribed, they changed different variations of the people's names, okay? So that's a point that must be made. And you will see that when you start going through all the many books that we have. And I have read many books of our history, okay? And I've had, I've had a lot of years to do that. And anyway, and so when they saw all the blasphemy being committed in Judah, okay, and Jerusalem, and said, at last, he said, why was I born to see this day? I feel like that right now. You know what I'm saying? To see the bull crap that's going on right now, and think about the fact that my people are growing up in this bull crap that we in right now, and they get all this slick plans about how to kill us off going on right now. But whatever, it is what it is. The Most High rules in the kingdom of men. And though they do that, they shall have to pay. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? You know, keep on. Sit down, Luke. Anyway, so he said, why was I born to see this? The ruin of my people, the ruin of the holy city, and to dwell there when it was given over to the enemy, the sanctuary given over to aliens. Her temple has become like a man without honor. Her glorious vessels have been carried into captivity. Her babes have been killed in her streets. Her youth by the sword of the foe. What nation has not inherited her palaces and has not seized her spoil? Now, this has happened a number of times. Nations was risen, Father rose them up. Why? Because we got all up into that dang iniquity, following them other nations, wanting to be like them, practicing that thing. Oh, Yahweh, okay, that's what you want to do? Okay, here it is, okay? So anyway, so he said, what nation has not inherited her palaces and has not seized her spoil? All her adornment has been taken away. No longer free, she has become a slave. And behold, our holy place, our beauty, our glory has been laid waste. The Gentile, all those other nations have profaned it. Why should we live any longer? That's how we spend. Why should we live any longer? And Mattathias and his sons, they rent their clothes and they put on sackcloth and mourned greatly. It said, then the king's officers, to add insult to injury, the king's officers who were enforcing the apostasy came to the city of Modein to make them offer sacrifices. Okay, so they forced our ancestors to give up your faith, and you better adopt ours. If you don't, you're gonna be killed, tortured, in all kind of fancy ways that we can think of. Okay, and it says many from Yisreal, many of the Hebrews came to them. Okay, and Mattathias and his sons were assembled. It said, then the king's officers spoke to Mattathias as follows. One of these evil, lawless men coming from the king all the way down to Modin and comes to Mattathias and says as follows. Oh, you are the leader, honored and great in this city, and supported by sons and brothers. Now, be the first to come and do what the king commands, as all the other Gentiles and all the other Hebrews and men of Yehuda and Judah and those that are left in Jerusalem have done. Then you and your sons will be numbered among the friends of the king. You hear this. And you and your sons will be honored with silver and gold and many gifts. But Mattathias answered and said in a loud voice, even if all the nations that live under the rule of the king obey him and have chosen to do his commandments, departing each one from the faith of his father, yet I and my sons and my brethren will live by the covenant of our father. Far be it from us to desert the law and the ordinances. We will not obey the king's words by turning aside from our faith in the Most High to the right hand or to the left. And when he had finished speaking these words, a Jew, a Hebrew, let me not say a Jew, a Hebrew came forward in the sight of all to offer sacrifices upon the altar in Modin, according to the king's command. He was ready to do it. When Mattathias, a righteous man, saw it, he burned with zeal and in his heart was stirred. He gave vent to righteous anger, and he ran and he killed him upon the altar. At the same time that he killed the man on the altar, he killed the king's officer who was forcing the people to do us the sacrifice, the unclean thing on the altar, and he tore down the altar which had been profaned. Then he burnt more with zeal for the law of the Most High. And he remembered and he thought about Phinehas and what Phinehas had did against Zimri, the son of Selu. And then Mattathias, he cried out in the city with a loud voice, saying, let every one who is zealous for the law of the Most High and who supports the covenant of the Most High come with me. Anyone who does not want to violate the laws of the Most High and commit this crime of sacrificing polluted animals on the altar, come with me. And he and his sons, they fled to the hills and left all that they had in the city. Well, our enemies make sure that the majority of us ain't got no hill. We ain't got no hills to run to, okay? But don't you worry about it. When the time comes, look, you don't worry about no hill, because the Father can rise up and destroy a many with a few. You know what I'm saying? It don't matter what you ain't got no hiding place. The Most High will be your stronghold, okay? So anyway, let me get back to this. It said, then many who were seeking righteousness. Ain't no righteousness in this dang on place. Ain't all these laws and stuff we file and all this wickedness we file, and it ain't got nothing to do with no righteousness. It said, then many who were seeking righteousness and seeking justice went down to the wilderness to dwell there. they, their sons, their wives, and their cattle, because evil pressed heavily upon them. All throughout where we are is nothing but evil and lawless men and wickedness and corruption and perverseness. It says, and it was reported to the king's officers and to the troops in Jerusalem, the city of David, right here where you see sitting behind me. This is the real thing right here behind me. And it was reported to the king's officers and to the troops in Jerusalem, the city of David, that men who had rejected the king's commands had gone down to the hiding places in the wilderness. And many of his officers pursued them, and they overtook them. And they encamped opposite them, and they prepared for battle against them on the Sabbath day. Now, the Sabbath day was a day of rest for us. It says, and they said to them, enough of this. Come out and do what the king commands, and you will live. But they said, we will not come out, nor will we do what the king commands, and so profane the Sabbath day. Then the enemy hastened to attack them, but they did not answer them or hurl a stone at them or block up the hiding places. For they said, let us all die in our innocence. Heaven and earth testify for us that you are killing us unjustly. Now, when they said that, it reminded me of when I was like, when I was 13 years old. I was not asleep. I was praying, and I saw a vision where it looked like I was in the heavens. I don't know what prompted me for that, but I was not asleep. I was awoke, and I saw the heavens. And when I saw the heavens, I saw a beautiful pedestal, like sitting suspended in the air. And there was a man on the pedestal that was sitting in the air with a very beautiful, 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 beautiful garment with beautiful radiant colors that I have never even ever seen before. And I saw people at the bottom, and they were in white robes, and they were waving their hands, and they were saying to him, when are you going to avenge our blood? And it was a very wonderful, wonderful vision that I had while woke. While woke, I was a very young person. I had it while I was woke. And I used to have many of those dreams as a young person, but when I attained the age of maybe 16 or 17, they stopped. So I don't know what that was all about, but anyway, I just said I was thinking about that when I was reading here. And it says, it said, for they said, let us all die in our innocence. Heaven and earth testify for us that you are killing us unjustly. Okay, so the Most High himself is going to take vengeance for the innocent. Okay, he's going to do that. Just wait, sit down, look. You may not be here, but it shall surely come to pass. And it said, and so they attacked them on the Sabbath. They attacked them and murdered them, and they died with their wives, the children, and the cattle, to number of 1,000 persons, a number of 1,000 persons. So it said, when Mattathias and his friends learned of it, they mourned for them deeply. And each of them said, okay, to his neighbor, if we all do as our brethren have done, and we refuse to fight with these uncircumcised Gentiles for our lives and for our ordinances, they will quickly destroy us from the face of the earth. So they made this decision that day. Let us fight against every man who comes to attack us on the Sabbath day. let us not all die as our brothers died in their hiding places. Let's not do that. Then there united with them a company of Hasidians. These were some other Hebrews who were mighty warriors of Yisreal. Everyone who offered himself willingly for the law, to walk in righteousness, to walk in the law of Yah, of which we do not honor Yah's laws today in these churches. We are following the laws and the religions of the heathens. So anyway, but they were ready to offer themselves willingly for the law of Yah, which we are not observing today. And it says, and all who became fugitives to escape their troubles joined them and reinforced them. So there's nothing wrong with becoming a fugitive. You understand what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Come on now. Our people became a fugitive. If you read all of our stories, when our people were under attack, they ran and they found refuge. They found secret places. They became fugitives. Okay, that you know, they didn't just you know, okay, here's my hand, here's my arms. Okay, you know, lock me up or go put me in a jail cell. You know, them, no, they didn't do that. That's not how that rolled out. So anyway, and all who became fugitives to escape their troubles joined them and reinforced them. They organized an army and they struck down sinners in their anger and lawless men in their wrath. The survivors fled, and any survivor, they fled to the Gentiles for safety. Okay? Now, think about the other story that I told you about Ruth. Okay? Ruth, what she did, she said, she prayed to the Most High, give me disdain for my enemy, that my hand will be in your hand to cut Holofernes down like my ancestor Simeon. Okay? And she said, well, if you give me this disdain and give me the design and honor my design, I'm going to cut off Holofernes' head. Okay? And in her boldness and her wisdom, she went down into the camp and she beheaded the head of Holofernes. So anyway, let me go on. And so Mattathias and his friends went about and they tore down the altars. They forcefully circumcised all the uncircumcised boys that they found within the borders of Yisreal, okay, where it went along with the king to forget about the seal of Abraham and the Abrahamic covenant of circumcision. They got together as an army and they went and hunted down all the arrogant men, and their work in their hands and what they were doing as an army, it prospered in their hands. And they rescued the law. They took back their books. They took back what they stole. They took back the laws. They took back these books. They rescued the law out of the hands of the Gentile nations and out of the hands of the kings. And they never let the sinners gain the upper hand. The Most High was with them, although they were in captivity. And it said, now the days drew near for Mattathias to die. And he said to his sons, arrogance and reproach have now become strong in the land. It is a time of ruin and furious anger. Now, my children, show zeal for the law and give your lives for the covenant of our fathers. Okay? What do? You save the innocent by what? By any means necessary. You save your life by any means necessary, as our ancestors did. It said, remember the deeds of the fathers, which they did in their generation. How do you know what the deeds of our fathers were? You won't know what the deeds, you won't know what they did. You won't know how they handled things unless you go and read our ancient books. You have nothing to go on. You have no examples. You don't know what they did in times of trouble. Go and read the books. It said, remember the deeds of our fathers, which they did, our fathers and our mothers, and what they did in their generations, and receive great honor and an everlasting name. And it said, was not Abraham found faithful when tested, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness? Jehoshaphat, in the time of his distress, when Zedekiah was after him to pollute him, he kept the commandment, and he became the Lord of Egypt. He became viceroy of Egypt. He became second to the king of Egypt. And they built him a great house there. Phinehas, our father, okay, in the wilderness. It said, because he was deeply zealous, received the covenant of everlasting priesthood in the wilderness, okay? Around the time, I can't remember which was an incident. I'm not sure whether it was when they was worshiping the golden calf or whatever. But anyway, Yahshua, because he fulfilled the command, he became a judge in Israel. Caleb, because he testified in the assembly, received an inheritance in the land. David, which you call David, because he was merciful, he inherited the throne of the kingdom forever. And then he bought this threshing floor here, you know, where this temple is right here in the Jebusite city that you see right behind me. That is there today if you want to go see it. Elijah, because of great zeal for the law, was taken up into heaven. Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, they believed and they were saved from the flames of the fire when they wanted to cast them in the furnace. Daniel, because of his innocence, was delivered from the mouth of the lions. The lions wouldn't even touch him. Remember when they threw Jehoshaphat into the pit? There were scorpions and everything. The Most High forbid those things to even touch him. Okay, and so observe. Okay, Daniel, because of his innocence, was delivered from the mouth of the lion, and so observes from generation to generation. You don't know many of the stories. You need to read so that you can find out what happened, how it happened, to give you some knowledge, some information, and some wisdom about the examples of your forefathers, the examples of your foremothers, okay? How they dealt with the situation, okay? It said that none who put their trust in him will lack strength. It said, do not fear the words of the wicked. Do not fear the words of the sinner. Do not fear the words of the other uncircumcised nations, okay? Who hate you and hate what you were, who you are, and who plan to destroy you. Do not fear them. It said, for his splendor will turn into dung and into worms, because this body right here is going to go back to the dirt, and the worms and all that kind of thing is going to eat it up. It don't last forever, okay? And it said, today he will be exalted, but tomorrow he will not be found, because he has returned to the dust and his plans will perish. So it said, my children, be encouraged and grow strong in the law of the Most High. We're not following the law of the Most High right now. This is Gentile law, corrupt law, laws written against you. We're not following no Most High law. Okay, now come on, let's get this real. It's real right here. It said, but he told his children, he said, my children, be courageous and grow strong in the law, for by it you will gain honor. It said, now behold, I know that Simeon, your brother, is wise in counsel. Always listen to him. He shall be your father. Judas Maccabeus has been a mighty warrior from his youth. He shall command the army for you and fight the battle against the people. Now, let me help you understand something. They were in captivity. Yah had raised up the enemies against them. But what did they do? They escaped. They became fugitives. They started an army and they battled and battled and battled. So it said, Judas Maccabeus has been a mighty warrior from his youth. He shall command the army for you, and he shall fight the battles against the people. You shall rally about you all who observe the law, all who observe Yahweh's law. Do you know what Yahweh's law is? No, because they took those things from you. You don't know what his law is. You need to go and seek and find out what his law is. Books that are available, books that are coming up. People are finding different things and that has been hidden. They are coming up. Go and seek and find out where they are. Read to your children. It said, and you shall rally about you all who observe the law and avenge the wrong done to your people. This is what he told his children. It says, pay back the Gentiles in full and heed what the law commands. What the law tells you, you heed what our law commands. It says, then he blessed them and he was gathered to his father. He died in the 146th year and was buried in the tomb of his father in Modian. And all Israel mourned for him with great lamentation. Now, if you understand, you can understand why your enemies would not put and give you these books right here. They wouldn't have, they don't want you to have these books, but they have been reading them and they have been enjoying them and they have been using this information against us. It says, then Judas, the son who was called Maccabeus, took command in his place. All his brothers and all who had joined his father helped him. They gladly fought for Yisreal. They gently fought for their people. They gladly fought for their Black people. They gladly fought for the nation of Yisreal. They gladly fought for them because they loved them. They loved their people. Okay? And he extended the glory of his people. It says, like a giant, he put on his breastplate. He girded on his armor of war and waged battles, protecting the host by his sword. Now, if he had a gun or whatever the hell he may have had at that time, he would have used whatever they was using at that time. But he waged war. He waged battles, and they protected the host by his sword. He was like a lion. This is our ancestor. Our ancestor. They tripped you out and told him that this history is somebody else's. This is our history. They want to tell you, oh, it's a fantasy. It was not a fantasy. They didn't want to tell you. That's why they made you lose that information and that knowledge. It made you think it was somebody else because they don't want you to know this stuff. They don't want you to think on the deeds of your ancestors. And it said, so he was like a lion in his deeds. He was like a lion's cub roaring for prey. Like a lion's cub roaring for prey. He searched out and pursued the lawless. He burnt those who troubled his people, his nation, the Hebrews. Lawless men shrank back for fear of him. All the evildoers were confounded, and deliverance prospered by his hand. He embittered many kings. but he made Jacob glad by his deeds, and his memory is blessed forever. He went through the cities of Yehuda. He destroyed the ungodly out of the land. Thus he turned away the wrath from Israel. Because of what they did, because of raising an army, and they cut down all the evil, lawless, wicked people that included the other nations and their own people. They cut them off. And when they did that, Yah looked down and he turned away the wrath from against our people. And Judas Maccabeus, he was renowned to the ends of the earth, and we are still talking about him today. We wrote his record in these books, and these are our books. And he gathered in those who were perishing. We'll leave somebody laying in the street that's perishing. We won't even try to rescue or save anybody that's perishing. We'll look at a poor man and we'll walk on top of him. Wicked, corrupt. This is the ways that we have learned, following the laws of this wicked country, of all of our enemies, of all of our oppressors. We practice wickedness. It says, but anyway, let me continue. But Apollonius gathered together the Gentile nations and a large force from Sumeria to fight against Israel. When Judas Maccabeus learned of it, he went out to meet him, and he defeated and killed him. Many were wounded and fell, and the rest fled. Then they seized their spoils, and Judas took the sword of Apollonius and used it in battle the rest of his life. So not only were they in captivity, but when they fled the place, when it was overrun with the Gentile nations and everything, they went down and they established an army. And for all of their life, they warred and they won battles. And then they had because of the righteousness that they were doing, it removed the indignation and wrath that Yahweh had against his people. And it said, now when Siram, the commander of the Syrian army, heard that Judas had gathered a large company, including a body of faithful men who stayed with him and went out to battle, he said, I will make a name for myself and win honor in the kingdom. I will make war on Judas and his company, who scorned the king's command. What command? To sin against the Most High, to not follow his laws, his precepts, his commandments, to trample on the covenant, to offer sacrifices to idol gods. So anyway, so this guy is saying, yeah, I want to go after him because he scorned the king's commands. And again, a strong army of ungodly men went up with him to help him to take vengeance on the sons of Israel. Now, our enemies believe over and over again. They have set up and they have tried to take vengeance on us over and over again. I'm trying to tell you. And it says that when he approached the ascent of Beth Horon, Judas went out to meet him with a small company. It said, but when they saw the army coming to meet them, they said to Judas, how can we, few as we are, fight against so great a multitude? And we are faint, for we have eaten nothing today. And Judas replied, it is easy for many to be hemmed up by a few. Y'all don't think that. When the time comes, let me tell you one thing. If the Father is in it, let's listen to our ancestor. He said, it is easy for many to be hemmed in by few. For in the sight of heaven, there is no difference between saving by many or by few. It is not on the size of the army. Listen to this. Weapons of mass destruction, all kind of artillery, trucks, tanks, booms, bombs, whatever, etc., 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 etc. But it is not on the size of the army that victory in battle depends. But strength comes from heaven. They come against us in great pride and lawlessness to destroy us and our wives and our children and to despoil us. But we fight for our lives and our laws. He himself will crush them. The Most High, when you side with the Most High and him only, and when it is our time, at our time, the Most High himself through us will crush them before us. And he told them, he said, as for you, do not be afraid of them. Now, when it's our time, we don't have to be afraid of nobody. No. Because the Most High will fight through us in our hands and our feet. We will be the hammer and the nail and the axe or whatever. Okay? And it says, so when he finished speaking to his comrades, his people, he rushed suddenly against Siran and his big, large, bang-on army. And they were crushed before him because his confidence was in the Most High and him only. They pursued them down the descent of Beth Horon to the plain. 800 of them fell. 800 of them were slain and slaughtered. And the rest, they fled into the land of the Philistines. Then Judah and his brethren began to be feared, and terror fell upon the Gentiles round about them. And his fame reached the king, and the Gentiles talked of the battles of Judas. We are not a Gentile. We are not what they call a goy, but we are the children of the Most High. We are the descendants of Shem, and we were cast out of our land. But the Most High will bring us back into this land. You see that? And it said that the land, there won't be enough room for us. And the Father will stretch the land out. This is what it looks like behind me, a wilderness. But this wilderness awaits us. And this wilderness is looking for us. And this wilderness is in lamentation. And this wilderness is in her Sabbath right now. She's in her Sabbath days of rest, awaiting her children to come home. So it says, when King Antiochus heard these reports, he was greatly angered, and he sent and gathered all the forces of his kingdom, a very strong army. And he opened his coffers and gave a year's pay to his forces and ordered them to be ready for any need. And I'm going to pause this for a moment because I get my cord. Keep going. I'm back. When King Antiochus heard these reports, he was greatly angered. And he sent and he gathered all the forces of his kingdom and a very strong army. And he opened his coffers and gave a year's pay to his forces, and he ordered them to be ready for any need. Then he saw that the money in the treasury was exhausted, and that the revenues from the country were small because of the dissensions and disaster which he had caused in the land by abolishing the laws that had existed from the earlier days. And he feared that he might not have such funds as he had before for his expenses and for the gifts which he used to give more lavishly than preceding kings. He was greatly perplexed in his mind and determined to go to Persia and collect the revenue from those regions and raise a large fund. So he left Lysias, a distinguished man of royal lineage, in charge of the king's affairs for the river Euphrates to the border of Egypt. And Lysias was also to take care of Antiochus, his son, until he returned. And he turned over to Lysias half of his troop and the elephants, and gave him orders about all that he wanted done. As for the residents of Judea and Jerusalem, Lysias was to send a force against them to wipe out and destroy the strength of the Hebrews of our ancestors, Yisreal, and the remnant, all of us that were left in Jerusalem. He was to banish, listen to that, that's what they're trying to do to us now. He was to banish the memory of us from that place forever, as their plan is to banish us from the earth today. This is what all this is really all about. You don't get it. This is what the vaccine and all that is about, but you don't get it. And so, and their purpose back then was to banish the memory of us from the place, and to set aliens in all their territories, in all our territories, and to distribute. This is what has happened to our land right now. This is why strangers are in our land. The Europeans are in our land right now, and every other person is in our land. And then many of our cousins who've been whitewashed, and some of, are in our land, and they fighting over today. So anyway, so it says, and they settled aliens in all our territories, and they distributed our land, okay? Then the king took the remaining half of his troops, and he departed from Antiochus, his capital, in the 140th year. And he crossed the river Euphrates River, and he went through the upper provinces. And Lysias chose Ptolemy, the son of Dorymanus, and Nicanor, and Georgia, mighty men among the friends of the king. Now, let me show you about this. These fellows that I just mentioned are what they gave you in Christianity in the book of Acts. And these same murderers that were murdering our people, they gave them to you and said that they was bishops of the church. Okay, whatever, anyway. So anyway, mighty men among the friends of the king. And he sent with them 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry to go into the land of Judea and destroy it. And the king had commanded. So they departed with their entire force. And when they arrived, they encamped near Emmaus, or whatever, in the plain. Then the traders of the region had heard what was said to them, and they took silver and gold in immense amounts, and fetters. Fetters are chains. Those are the chains that they put on your ankles, or they put on the ankles of slaves. And those merchant men and traders, they went to the camp to get the sons of Israel, to get our people, okay? The Hebrews, for slaves. and forces from Syria and the land of the Philistines joined with them. They all hated us, and they still hate us today. It says, now when Judas and his brethren saw that misfortune had increased and that the forces were encamped in their territory, they also learned what the king's command to do to his people to cause their final destruction. See, every nation that comes against us down through the generations of time have always tried to find all kind of millions of ways to finally deal with the Negroid, the Hebrew problem of how to destroy us and to wipe us out off of the face of the planet. That has been that final destruction. That final plan has been in the plans for generations of time, but they can't do it. Okay, anyway, it says, but they said to one another, when I say they can't do it, they can't kill all of us. Okay, they can. Okay. But they have killed a lot of us. Okay, they've done that. They did that, but they were allowed to because of what? We rebelled against the Most High. We started following iniquity. We started following after the heathens. Okay, let me keep on going. It said, but they said to one another, our ancestors said to one another, let us repair the destruction of our people and fight for our people and the sanctuary. And the congregation assembled to be ready for battle. Now, this is all during the time of captivity, when kings had took control and was making us slaves. Okay, these are the fugitive that ran from that situation, built an army and everything. So let's listen to this story. It said, and the congregation assembled to be ready for battle and to pray and ask for mercy and compassion. So they was willing to die or win the battle. And it said Jerusalem was uninhabited, like it is right now. Look at it. Like a wilderness. It probably was, maybe looked a little bit, maybe had a few more things there or whatever than what you see right now today, because this happened under the Roman occupation. And that's what the end result is from the Roman occupation. And we're still under the Romans at this, as we speak right now. And we're under Roman civil law. Okay, that's why you have the Senate and all that other bull crap. And we are being ruled by an international rulership. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, let me move on. So it says Jerusalem was inhabited like was uninhabited like a wilderness. Not one of her children went in or out. The sanctuary was trampled down. Okay, it was trampled on. And the sons of aliens held their citadel. It was a lodging place for the Gentile nations, just like right now. The Gentiles are not in this area because Yahweh has preserved this area for us to return to the original location. So we have Gentiles who are lodging in the city of Ammon, and they are presenting themselves as if they are us. Okay, but so anyway, it says, and so they had a citadel, and it was a lodging place for the Gentile strangers, okay? And joy was taken from Jacob, the flute and the harp ceased to play. No more beautiful, joyful sounds was heard in this area, okay? It says, so they assembled and went to Mizpah, opposite Jerusalem, because Yisreal formerly had a place of prayer in Mizpah. They fasted that day, put on sackcloth and sprinkled ashes on their heads and rent their clothes. And they opened the book of the law to inquire into those matters about which the Gentiles were consulting the images of their idols. They also brought the garments of the priesthood and the first fruits and tithes, and they stirred up the Nazarites, okay, who had completed their days. And they cried aloud to heaven, saying, what shall we do with these? Where shall we take them? The sanctuary is trampled down and profaned, and thy priests mourn in humiliation. And behold, the nations, the Gentiles, are assembled against us to destroy us. Thou knowest what they plot against us. I know what they're plotting against us. It said, how? They cried. He said to the Most High, he said, how will we be able to withstand them if thou doest not help us? Then they sounded the trumpets and gave a loud shout. And after this, Judas appointed leaders of the people in charge of thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens. And he said to those who were building houses or were betrothed or were planting vineyards or were faint-hearted, that each should return to his home according to the law. Then the army marched out, our army marched out and encamped to the south of Emmaus. And Judas said, girt yourselves and be valiant. See how we encouraged our people? The faint-hearted, they can go home, okay. But he said the ones who were strong in Yah and believed in him and had faith in him only. He said, girt yourselves and be valiant. Be ready early in the morning to fight with these Gentiles, to fight with these nations, to fight with these foreigners who have assembled against us, who have devised evil against us to destroy us and our sanctuary. It is better for us to die in battle. This is what I said, our people said when they were in captivity. We too are in captivity. We too are prisoners of war. They were prisoners of war, but they said it is better for us to die in battle than to see the misfortune of our nation and of our sanctuary. But as his will in heaven may be, so he will too. And this is what we must say about the future of our children and our old women and our young women and our old men and our young men and those that are feeble among us and our handicapped and our babies. Do we really care about them? When somebody is deceitful and coming to try to kill and wipe you all out? It says now, Gorgias took the 5,000 infantry and 1,000 picked cavalry, and his divisions moved out by night to fall upon the camp of the Hebrews and attack them suddenly. That's how they do. They come and get us in the middle of the night. That's how they fall upon you when you're not expecting it. They stormtroop your behind into your home with guns held up high. So anyway, same way that they did it then, same way they do it now. So Gorgias took 5,000 infantry, and we already have the military station already in all these cities right now, ready, waiting for the call, for them to say go, and they're gonna stormtroop up in your house. What you gonna do to save the life of your children? Anyway, it says now Gorgias took 5,000 infantry and 1,000 picked cavalry, and his divisions moved out by night. A lot of times they come 4 or 5 in the morning. When you think not, when the time you're sleeping or you're doing something, that your mind is not on it. They ain't making no announcements when they come. They come when you at least expect it. So they moved out by night to fall upon the camp of the Hebrews and slay them and attack them suddenly. Men from the citadel were his guides. They had already mapped out the city. They already knew the lay of the land. They already had been making plans. They already scoped it out. They already had people spying and doing investigations in the land to find out where everything is, everything was, streets, whatever, know how to go here, how to go there, hiding places, everything. Come on now. So the people in the citadel that were sitting on top of this hill right now, which is Zion, where they can look out across the city, were their guides. That's where they erected it, right here behind me, where you can go into this land right now, into what's called Tel Arid, and see where they were and imagine where they were on this particular, where this temple stood right here. Looking across the land. You can stand right there and look all around and see all around and about you. It was like a tower. It said, but Judas heard of it, and he and his mighty men moved out to attack the king's forces in Emmaus, while the divisions were still absent from the camp. When Gorgias entered the camp of Judas by night, he found no one there. So he looked for them in the hills, because he said, these men are fleeing from us. Now at daybreak, Judas appeared in the plain with 3,000 men, but they did not have armor and swords such as they desired. And they saw the camp of the Gentiles, strong and fortified. Ain't that what you're thinking about? Oh, the military and all these people, whatever, they get all these weapons and we ain't hardly got none, and we can't even get no arms, we ain't get no bullets or whatever, I guess we gonna die. Now what we gonna do? But our ancestors, they looked out and they appeared in the plain. They appeared in the plain with 3,000 men. But they did not have armor and swords such as they desired. And they saw the camp of the Gentiles strong and fortified with cavalry around about. And these men were trained in war. You're thinking about yourself. You're not trained in war. You're not trained to fight. You don't know nothing about what to do. That's what you're thinking. It said, but Judas said to the men who were with him, do not fear their numbers or be afraid when they charge. Remember how our fathers were saved at the Red Sea. That's why you need to read our stories. There's many of them that you haven't even heard. When Pharaoh with his forces pursued them. And now let us cry to heaven to see whether he will. They didn't know for sure. We're going to cry to heaven together to see whether he will find favor with us. You see why it's important for us to come together and unite? To cry and to see whether he will favor us, whether or not he will remember his covenant with our fathers and crush and destroy this army before us today. It said, then all the Gentiles will know that there is one who redeems and saves Yisreal. The redeeming and the saving and everything, we ain't been redeemed and we ain't been saved. When we are redeemed and we are saved, we will be delivered up out of these lands, and all of our everything that was taken will be restored to us. So anyway, it said, then all the Gentiles would know that there is one who redeems and saves Israel. It said, when the foreigners looked up and saw them coming against them, they went forth from their camp to battle. Then the men with Judas blew the trumpets and engaged in battle. The Gentiles were crushed and they fled into the plain. And all those in the rear, they fell by the sword. They pursued them to Gazera and to the plains of Idumea, that's Esau's territory, and to Azotus and to Jamia, and 3,000 of them fell by the edge of the sword. Then Judas and his force turned back from pursuing them, and he said to the people, do not be greedy for plunder, for there is a battle before us. Don't be back here trying to see what you're going to get. We still got a battle before us. And so Gorgias and his forces are near us in the hills, but stand now against our enemies and fight them, and afterwards seize the plunder boldly. Just as Judas was finishing the speech, a detachment appeared coming out of the hills. They saw that their army had been put to flight and that the Hebrews, our ancestors, were burning the camp, for the smoke that was seen showed what had happened. When they perceived this, they were greatly frightened. And when they also saw the army of Judas drawn up in the plain for the battle, they all fled into the land of the Philistines. Then Judas returned to plunder the camp, and they seized much gold and silver and cloth dyed blue and sea purple and great riches. On their return, they sang hymns and praises to heaven, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever. Thus Yisreal had a great deliverance that day. Those of the foreigners who escaped went and reported to Lysias all that had happened. When he heard it, he was perplexed and he was discouraged, for things had not happened to Yisreal or the Hebrews as he had intended, nor had they turned out as the king had commanded him. But the next year he mustered 60,000 picked infantrymen and 5,000 cavalry to subdue them. And they came into Idumea and encamped at Beth Zor, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. When he saw that the army was strong, he prayed, saying, "Oh, blessed art thou, O Savior of Yisreal. Why did it crush the attack of the mighty? Who did it crush the attack of the mighty warriors by the hand of thy servant David?" You see how they go back and put the Most High in remembrance. "And did it give the camp of the Philistines into the hands of Jonathan, the son of Saul, and of the man who carried his armor. So do thou him in this army by the hand of the people Yisreal, and let them be ashamed of their troops and their cavalry." See, our people, they looked upon the examples left to us by our ancestors in our books that taught us of their victories in battle and their prayers. It said, "Fill them with cowardice, melt their boldness of their strength." Fill them with cowardice again, melt the boldness of their strength, let them tremble in their destruction. Strike them down with the sword of those who love thee, and let all who know thy name praise thee with hymns. Then both sides attacked. And there fell of the army of Lysias 5,000 men. They fell in action. And when Lysias saw the rout of his troops and observed the boldness which inspired those of Judas and how ready they were either to live or to die. Listen at our ancestors. They were ready to fight, whether they lived or died, putting their trust in Yahweh, King of the earth, Master of the universe. And he departed to Antioch and enlisted mercenaries to invade Judea again with an even larger army. Then said Judas and his brothers, behold, our enemies are crushed. Let us go to cleanse the sanctuary and dedicate it. So all the army assembled and they went up to Mount Zion. This here is Mount Zion. This here right behind me in Tel Arid is the real Mount Zion. They went to Mount Zion. That's Mount Zion right there. What you see around there, that was where the cities of Jerusalem was. But they went here to Mount Zion. And they saw the sanctuary. Our sanctuary is desolate right now. The altar profaned and the gates burnt. In the courts, they saw bushes spring up. And we got bushes, whatever you call those little blow bushes that are blowing around. They're blowing around there right now. And in the courts, they saw bushes spring up as in the thickets or as on one of the mountains. They saw also the chambers of the priests in ruins. Look at where we are now still. It's in ruins. This was after the Roman occupation. Then they rent their clothes and they mourn with great lamentations and they sprinkle themselves with ashes. They fell face down on the ground and they sounded the signal on the trumpets and they cried out to heaven. Then Judas detailed men to fight against those in the citadel until he had cleansed the sanctuary. He chose blameless, righteous, blameless priests devoted to the law. And they cleansed the sanctuary and they removed the defiled stones to an unclean place. They deliberated what to do about the altar of burnt offerings, which had been profaned. And they thought it best to tear it down, lest it bring a reproach upon them, for the Gentiles had defiled it. So they tore down the altar and stored the stones in a convenient place on the temple hill until there should come a prophet to tell them what to do with them. Then they took unhewn stone, as the law directs, and built a new altar like the former one. They also rebuilt the sanctuary and the interior of the temple and consecrated the courts. They made new holy vessels and brought the lampstands, the altar of incense, and the table into the temple. Then they burnt incense on the altar and lighted the lamps on the lampstand, and these gave light in the temple. They placed the bread on the table and hung up the curtains. Thus they finished all the work they had undertaken. Early in the morning on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is the month of Keslev, in the 148th year, they rose and offered sacrifice as the law directs on the new altar of burnt offerings which they had built. At the very season that on the very day that the Gentiles had profaned it, it was dedicated with songs and harps and flutes and cymbals. All the people fell on their faces and worshiped, and they blessed heaven who had prospered them. So they celebrated the dedication of the altar for 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness. They offered a sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decorated the front of the temple with golden crowns and small shields, and they restored the gates and the chambers for the priests, and they furnished them with doors. There was very great gladness among the people, and the reproach of the Gentiles was removed. Why? Because they turned to righteousness. Why? Because they turned back to the law. Because they get rid of all of those idol gods. They stopped worshiping all of that. Okay? And it says, then Judas and his brothers and all the assembly of Israel determined that every year at that season, the day of dedication of the altar should be observed with gladness and joy for 8 days, beginning with the 25th day of the month of Keslev. At that time, they fortified Mount Zion. This is Mount Zion. This is Mount Zion. This is the real Mount Zion, with high walls and strong towers round about to keep the Gentiles from coming and trampling them down as they had done before. And he stationed a garrison to hold it. He also fortified Beth-zor, so that the people might have a stronghold that faced Idumea. When the Gentiles round about heard that the altar had been built and the sanctuary dedicated as it was before, they became very angry. They became very angry about that. And they determined to destroy the descendants of Jacob again, who lived among them. Now remember, at this time, we're under the Greek Empire. It says, so they began to kill and destroy among the people. But Judas made war on the sons of Esau, Idumea, sons of Esau in Idumea, at Akrabatim. The sons of Esau now, they call them Sephardim today. So it said, but Judas made war on the sons of Esau. Do they call them Sephardim in order so that we can forget who they are? Whatever, I don't know. It could be. Because all these people start changing their name and they start mixing seed and trying to dilute the seeds, to try to dilute our seed in order so that we can forget who we are, okay? They figure that maybe if they dilute the seed and they begin to mix with us and different things like that, that maybe that DNA won't activate so that we can remember. But you can't stop the prophecy. Look at us. It is the Most High that is putting it into our hearts and causing us to remember and to look and do the research. So Judas made war on the sons of Esau in Idumea at Akrabatim. Now, if that's how you pronounce it, Akrabattena. It said, because they kept lying in wait for Yisreal, jealousy. He dealt them a heavy blow and humbled them and despoiled them. He also remembered the wickedness of the sons of Baean, Baean, who were a trap and a snare to the people and ambushed them on the highway. See, this Idumean, this descendants of Esau and the descendants of Ishmael joined hands with the Europeans to trick us and keep us out of this land. And then they made an agreement to have the land together. Now they fighting and warring over it. Okay. And it said they were shut up by him in their towers. And he encamped against them and vowed their complete destruction and burnt with fire their towers and all who were in them. Okay. Now let me go back up here because I guess I did an interruption. Forget what the heck I was talking about. Okay, now it says, but Judas made war on the sons of Esau in Idumea at Akrabatim, because they kept lying in wait for Israel. He dealt them a heavy blow and humbled them and despoiled them. He also remembered, I guess I'm going too long talking. My mouth is so dry. Talking too goddamn much. I'm sorry. He also remembered the wickedness of the sons of Baean who were a trap and a snare to the people, and ambushed them on the highways. They were shut up by him in their towers, and he encamped against them, vowed their complete destruction, and burnt with fire their towers and all who were in them. Then he crossed over to attack the Ammonites. That's where the people calling themselves Jews today are, in the city of Ammon. It said, where he found a strong band and many people with Timothy as their leader. He engaged in many battles with them, and they were crushed before him. He struck them down. He also took Jazer and its villages. Then he returned to Judea. Now the Gentiles in Gilead gathered together against the Israelites who lived in their territories and planned to destroy them, but they fled to the strongholds of Dathema, D-A-T-H-E-M-A, and sent to Judas and his brothers a letter which said, the Gentiles round us have gathered together against us to destroy us. They are preparing to come and capture the stronghold to which we have fled, and Timothy is leading their forces. Now then, come and rescue us from their hands, for many of us have fallen. This is our history, people. Pay attention. And all our brethren who were in the land of Tob have been killed. The enemy have captured their wives and children and goods, and have destroyed about 1,000 men there. While the letter was still being read, behold, other messengers with their garments rent came from Galilee and made a similar report. It haven't been long, folks, that you got a few rights you thought in this country. It hasn't been long at all. What, 50-some years or so? That's nothing, okay? The snake arises with his ugly head again. It said, they said that against them had gathered together men of Ptolemais and Tyre and Sidon and all Galilee of the Gentiles to annihilate us. You think this is an effort by one person against us to wipe us out? Same way it was then, it's now. All these nations together have collectively come together to see how to annihilate us with a virus. When Judas and his people heard these messages, a great assembly was called to determine what they should do for their brethren who were in distress and were being attacked by enemies. The thing that was different about them is that they stuck together. They were together. The people who were righteous, they got together. They stood together with one mind as one man. It said, then Judas said to Simon, his brother, choose you men. Listen to what I'm saying here. Our people fought. Whether they won the battle or lost the battle, they fought for the sake of the people, the children, the babies, the mothers, the fathers, the old men, the young men. They fought. It said, then Judas said to Simon, his brother, choose you men and go and rescue your brethren and your sister in Galilee. We ain't trying to rescue nobody because we're not following the laws of the Most High. Our law says to rescue. Our law don't tell us to leave our people in the hands of the enemy. Our law says to rescue and to save. We don't do that because we're not following our law. We're following the law of our enemies. Now, let me read this again. It said, and Judah said to Simeon, his brother, choose your men and go and rescue your brethren and your sisterin in Galilee. I and Jonathan, my brother, will go to Gilead. Go to Gilead to rescue their brethren and their sisterin in Gilead, their people, the nation of Israel, the Hebrews. He said, but he left Joseph, the son of Zechariah, and Azariah, a leader of the people, with the rest of the forces in Judea to guard it. And he gave them his command. He said, take charge of this people, but do not engage in battle with the Gentiles until we return. Then 3,000 men were assigned to Simeon to go to Galilee, and 8,000 to Judas for Gilead. So Simon went to Galilee and fought many battles against the Gentile nations. All these nations rose up against us. All these nations are still against us. And we're in the midst of them. They're in the midst of us. All these world leaders, they know about us. You don't know about who you are and why they are after us like this. It said, then the Gentiles were crushed before them. He pursued them to the gate of Ptolemais, and as many as 3,000 of the Gentiles fell, and he despoiled them. Then he took the Hebrews of Galilee and Abatai with their wives and children and all they possessed, and led them to Judea with great rejoicing. Judas, Maccabeus, and Jonathan, his brother, crossed the Jordan and went 3 days' journey into the wilderness. They encountered the Nabateans, who met them peaceably and told them all that had happened to their brethren in Gilead. Many of them had been shut up in Bozrah and Bosor, Bozrah, one of Idumean's places, place of Esau, and Bosor, in Alima, and Chesphol, Maid, and Karnaim. All these cities were strong and large. And some have been shut up in other cities of Gilead. The enemies are getting ready to attack the strongholds tomorrow and take and destroy all these men in one day. Y'all think this is a game. This is war. We are at war. And you think it's a game with your video player and all this kind of stuff and doing all kind of stuff and got your mind on what's going on. Okay? It said, then Judas and his army quickly turned back to the wilderness road to Bozrah. And he took the city and he killed every male by the edge of the sword. Then he seized all its spoils and burnt it with fire. He departed from there at night, and they went all the way to the strongholds of Dethima. At dawn, they looked up, and behold, a large company that could not be counted, carrying ladders and engines of war to capture the strongholds and attacking the Hebrews within. So Judas saw that the battle had begun and that the cry of the city went up to heaven with trumpets and loud shouts. And he said to the men of his forces, fight today for your brethren and your sister. Then he came up behind them in 3 companies, who sounded their trumpets and cried aloud in prayer. And when the army of Timothy realized that it was Maccabeus, they fled before him, and he dealt them a heavy blow. As many as 8,000 of them fell that day. Next, he turned aside to Alima and fought against it and took it. And he killed every male in it, plundered it, and burnt it with fire. From there he marched on and took Caspho, Made, and Bosar, and other cities of Gilead. After these things, Timothy gathered another army and encamped opposite Rephaim on the other side of the stream. Judah sent men to spy out the camp, and they reported to him, all the Gentiles round us have gathered to him. It is a very large force. They also have hired Arabs, the children of Ishmael. They, the Greeks, hired the children of Ishmael, sons of Abraham, descendants of Hagar, to help them fight against us. And they are encamped across the stream, ready to come and fight against you. And Judas went to meet them. Now, as Judas and his army drew near to the stream of water, Timothy said to the officers of his forces, if he crosses over to us first, we will not be able to resist him, for he will surely defeat us. But if he shows fear and camps on the other side of the river, we will cross over to him and defeat him. When Judas approached the stream of water, he stationed the scribes of the people at the stream and gave them this command: permit no man to encamp, but make them all enter the battle. Then he crossed over against them first, and the whole army followed him. All the Gentiles were defeated before him, and they threw away their arms and fled into the sacred precinct at Carnaeum. But he took the city and burnt the sacred precinct with fire, together with all who were in them. Thus Carnaeum was conquered. They could stand before Judas no longer. Then Judas gathered together all the Israelites in Gilead, the small and the great, with their wives and children and goods, a very large company, to go to the land of Judah. So they came to Ephraim. This was as large and a very strong city on the road, and they could not go around it to the right or to the left. They had to go through it. But the men of the city shut them out and blocked up the gates with stones. And Judah sent them this friendly message: let us pass through your land to get to our land. No one will do you any harm. We will simply pass by on foot. But they refused to open to him. Then Judas ordered proclamation to be made to the army that each should encamp where he was. So the men and the forces encamped, and he fought against the city all that day and all that night. And the city was delivered into his hands. He destroyed every male by the edge of the sword and razed and plundered the city. Then he passed through the city over the slain, all the dead bodies. And they crossed the Jordan into the large plain before Beth-Shean. And Judas kept rallying the laggards and encouraging the people all the way till he came to the land of Judah. So they went up to Mount Zion right here, right behind me, which is called Tel Arad today. They keep changing the name, alias Capitolinus, Palestinia, and everything else. They changed the name, so you won't know where this place is or what it was, where it is, so that we forget. So they went up to Mount Zion with gladness and joy and offered burnt offerings, because not one of them had fallen before they returned in safety. Now, while Judas and Jonathan were in Gilead, and Simon, his brother, was in Galilee before Ptolemaeus, Joseph, the son of Zechariah, and Azariah, the commanders of the forces, heard of their brave deeds and of the heroic war they had fought. So they said, let us also make a name for ourselves, Let us go and make war on the Gentiles around about. And they issued orders to the men of the forces that were with them, and they marched against Jamina, and Georgia and his men came out of the city to meet them in battle. Then Joseph and Azariah were routed and were pursued to the borders of Judea. As many as 2,000 of the people of Israel fell that day. They had the wrong mind. It said, thus the people suffered a great rout because, thinking to do a brave deed, they got hurt because number one, they were trying to get a name for themselves. And they did not listen to Judas and his brothers, trying to get a name for themselves. It said, but they did not belong to the family of those men through whom deliverance was given to Israel. Okay? The man Judas and his brothers were greatly honored in all Israel and among all the Gentiles wherever their name was heard. Men gathered to them and praised them. Then Judas and his brothers went forth and fought the sons of Esau in the land of the south. He struck Hebron and its villages and tore down its strongholds and burnt its towers round about. Then he marched off to go into the land of the Philistines and passed through Marisa. On that day, some priests who wished to do a brave deed fell in battle, for they went out to battle unwisely. But Judas turned aside to Azotus in the land of the Philistines. He tore down their altars and the graven images of their gods. He burnt with fire. He plundered the cities and returned to the land of Judah. In a minute, I'm going to take a break, and I might have to come back and read. No, not might have to come back. I will come back. I don't know when it'll be to finish reading the first book of Maccabeus, which there are 4 books, and it would take me a while to do that. So anyway, it said King Antiochus was going through the upper provinces when he heard that Elymaeus in Persia was a city famed for its wealth in silver and gold. The temple was very rich, containing golden shields, breastplates, and weapons left there by Alexander, the son of Philip, the Macedonian king, who first reigned over the Greeks with his elephants. So he came and tried to take the city and plunder it, but he could not, because his plan became known to the men of the city, and they withstood him in battle. So he fled and in great grief departed from there to return to Babylon. Then someone came to him in Persia and reported that the armies which had gone into the land of Judah had been routed, that Lysias had gone first with a strong force, but had turned and fled before the Hebrews, that the Hebrews had grown strong from the arms supplied and abundant spoils which they had taken from the armies they had cut down, that they had torn down the abominations which he had erected upon the altars in Jerusalem, and that they had surrounded the sanctuary with high walls as before, and also Beth-zur, his city. When the king heard this news, he was astonished and badly shaken. He took to his bed and became sick from grief because things had not turned out for him as he had planned. He lay there for many days because deep grief continually gripped him, and he concluded that he was dying. So he called all his friends and said to them, sleep departs from my eyes, and I am downhearted with worry. I said to myself, to what distress I have come, and into what a great flood I now am plunged. For I was kind and beloved in my power, but now I remember the evils I did in Jerusalem. I seized all her vessels of silver and gold, and I sent to destroy the inhabitants of Judah without good reason. I know that it is because of this that these evils have come upon me. And behold, I am perishing of deep grief in a strange land. Then he called for Philip, one of his friends, and made him ruler over all his kingdom. He gave him the crown and his robe and the signet that he might guide Antiochus his son and bring him up to be king. Thus Antiochus the king died there in the 149th year. And when Lysias learned that the king was dead, he set up Antiochus the king's son to reign. Lysias had brought him up as a boy, and he named him Epator. Now the men in the citadel I kept hemming Yisreal in around the sanctuary. They were trying in every way to harm them and strengthen the Gentiles. So Judas decided to destroy them and assemble all the people to besiege them. They gathered together and besieged the citadel in the 150th year, and he brought siege towers and other engines of war. But some of the garrisons escaped from the siege, and some of the ungodly Israelites, here we go again, joined them. Just like a lot of us would join the enemy's side and are on the enemy's side already. It said, they went to the king and said, how long will you fail to do justice and to avenge our brethren? We were happy to serve your father, to live by what he said and to follow his commands. For this reason, the sons of our people besieged the citadel and became hostile to us. Moreover, they have put to death as many of us as they have caught, and they have seized our inheritance. And not against us alone have they stretched out their hands, but also against all the lands on their borders. And behold, today they have encamped against the citadel in Jerusalem to take it. They have fortified both the sanctuary and Beth-zor. And unless you quickly prevent them, they will do still greater things, and you will not be able to stop them. The king was enraged when he heard this. He assembled all his friends, the commanders of his forces, and those in authority and mercenary forces came to him from other kingdoms and islands of the sea. Child, look, I done read too much. It's hurting my throat from reading so much. So you know what? I think I'm going to stop right here. And I'll pick up from here, because I done read my throat dry. And so until next time, do your research. Try to read the books of our fathers and our mothers, that you may see the great examples that they left for us, that you may know of the wars that were brought against us and why they were brought against us. I'm thinking, why don't I go a little bit, about 15 more minutes and then stop? It says, and mercenaries forces came to him from other kingdoms and from islands of the sea. The number of his forces was 100,000 foot soldiers, 20,000 horsemen, and 32 elephants accustomed to war. The reason that I wanted to go back at this, because I want you to remember that Alexander came with elephants. So they had elephants accustomed to war. And when those elephants come in, they trample stuff down. It says they came through Idumea, Esau's territory. And they encamped against Beth-zor. And for many days they fought and built engines of war. But Our ancestors, the Hebrews, sallied out and burnt these with fire and fought manfully. You hear that? Because they were trusting in the Most High. They had engines of war. Our people came and burnt these with fire, and our men fought manually. Then Judas marched away from the citadel and encamped at Beth Zechariah, opposite the camp of the king. Early in the morning, the king rose and took his army by a forced march along the road to Beth Zechariah, and his troops made ready for battle and sounded their trumpets. They showed the elephants the juice of grapes and mulberries to arouse them for battle. Check this out. And they distributed the beasts among the phalanxes, Phalanxes. With each elephant, they stationed 1,000 men armed with coats of mail and with brass helmets on their heads, and 500 picked horsemen were assigned to each beast. Now, I want you to think about how big and how large an elephant is. These took their positions beforehand wherever the beast was. Wherever it went, they went with it, and they never left the elephant. And upon the elephants were wooden towers, strong and covered. They were fastened upon each beast by special harnesses, and upon each were 4 armed men who fought from the tower on top of the beast, and also its Indian driver. You hear that? They had Indian drivers. The rest of the horsemen were stationed on either side, on the 2 flanks of the army, to harass the enemy, while being themselves protected by the phalanxes, Phalanxes. When the sun shone upon the shield of gold and brass, the hills were ablaze with them and gleamed like flaming torches. Now, a part of the king's army was spread out on the high hills, and some troops were on the plain, and they advanced steadily and in good order. All who heard the noise made by their multitude, by the marching of the multitude and the clanking of their arms, they trembled, for the army was very large and strong. But Judas and his army advanced to the battle, and 600 men of the king's army fell. And Eleazar, called Avarim, saw that one of the beasts was equipped with royal armor. It was taller than all the others, and he supposed that the king was upon it. So he gave his life to save his people and to win for himself an everlasting name. He courageously ran into the midst of the phalanx, Phalanx, to reach it. He killed men right and left, and they parted before him on both sides. He got under the elephant, stabbed it from beneath, and killed it. But it fell to the ground upon him, and he died. And when the Hebrews saw the royal might and the fierce attack of the forces, they turned away in flight. The soldiers of the king's army went up to Jerusalem against them, and the king encamped in Judea and at Mount Sinai, right before you, right there, behind me. He made peace with the men of Bazor, and they evacuated the city because they had no provisions there to withstand a siege, since it was a sabbatical year for the land. So the king took Bazor and stationed a guard there to hold it. Then he encamped before the sanctuary for many days. He set up the siege towers, engines of war to throw fire and stones, machines to shoot arrows, and catapults. The Hebrews also made engines of war to match theirs and fought for many days. But they had no food in storage because it was the 7th year. Those who found safety in Judea from the Gentiles had consumed the last of the stores. Few men were left in the sanctuary because famine had prevailed over the rest, and they had been scattered each to his own place. Then Lysias heard that Philip, whom King Antiochus, while still living, had appointed to bring up Antiochus, his son, to be king, had returned from Persia and Media with the forces that had gone with the king, and that he was trying to seize control of the government. So he quickly gave orders to depart and said to the king, to the commander of the forces, and to the men, "We daily grow weaker. Our food supply is scant. The place against which we are fighting is strong, and the affairs of the kingdom press urgently upon us. Now then, let us come to terms with these men and make peace with them and with all their nation, and agree to let them live by their laws as they did before. For it was on account of their laws, which we abolished, that they became angry and did all these things." The speech pleased the king and the commanders, and he sent to the Hebrews an offer of peace, and they accepted it. So the king and the commanders gave them their oath on these conditions, that the Hebrews evacuated the strongholds. But when the king entered Mount Zion and saw what a strong fortress the palace was, he broke the oath he had sworn and gave orders to tear down the wall all around. Then he departed with haste and returned to Antioch. He found Philip in control of the city, but he fought against him and took the city by force. In the 151st year, Demetrius, the son of Seleucus, set forth from Rome sailed with a few men to a city by the sea, and there began to reign. As he was entering the royal palace of his father, the army seized Antiochus and Lysias to bring them to him. But when this act became known to him, he said, "Do not let me see their faces." So the army killed them. And Demetrius took his seat upon the throne of his kingdom. Then there came to him all the lawless and ungodly men of Israel, our ancestors, the Hebrews, the lawless, ungodly men. They were led by Eliasimos, who wanted to be a high priest. And they brought to the king this accusation against the people of Judah, against their own people. And his brothers had destroyed all your friends and have driven us out of our land. Now, let me say this to you. We have people among us who are our brother in our skin. They will betray us all as well. We've had this down through the centuries. Yes, nothing new under the sun. So our own wicked people went to them. And they brought the king accusations against the people, their own people. Judas and his brethren have destroyed all your friends and have driven us out of our land. Now then, send a man whom you trust. Let him go and see all the ruins which Judas has brought upon us and upon the land of the king, and let him punish them and all who help them. This is our own people. Our own people going to the enemy. So the king chose Bacchides, Bacchides, one of the king's friends, governor of the province beyond the river. He was a great man in the kingdom and was faithful to the king. And he sent him, and with him the ungodly Eliasimos, whom he made high priest. And he commanded him to take vengeance on the sons of Israel. So they marched away and came with a large force into the land of Judah. And he sent messengers to Judas and his brothers with peaceable but treacherous words. But they paid no attention to their words, for they saw that they had come with a huge force. Then a group of scribes appeared in a body before Eliasimos and Bacchides, who asked for just terms. The Hasidians were first among the sons of Israel to seek peace from them. For they said, a priest of the line of Aaron has come with the army, and he will not harm us. And he spoke peaceable words to them and swore with oaths to them, we will not seek to injure you or your friends. So they trusted him. But he seized 60 of them and killed them in one day in accordance with the words which was written. The flesh of thy saints and their blood they poured out around about Jerusalem, and there was none to bury them. Then the fear and dread of them fell upon all the people, for they said, there is no truth or justice in them, for they have violated the agreement and the oath which they swore. Then Bacchides departed from Jerusalem and encamped in Bethzatha, and he sent and seized many of the men who had deserted to him and some of the people, and killed them and threw them into a great pit. He placed Eliasimos in charge of the country and left with him a force to help him. Then Bacchides went back to the king. Eliasimos strove for the high priesthood, and all who were troubling their people joined him. They gained control of the land of Judah and did great damage in Israel. And Judah saw all the evil that Eliasimos and those with him had done among the sons of Israel. It was more than the Gentiles had done. So Judas went out into all the surrounding parts of Judea and took vengeance on the men who had deserted, and he prevented those in the city from going out into the country. When Elsemas saw that Judas and those with him had grown strong and realized that he could not withstand them, he returned to the king and brought wicked charges against them. Then the king sent Nicanor, one of his honored princes, who hated and detested Israel, and he commanded him to destroy the people. I want you to look into that Bible of yours and look at Nicanor, who hated us, and they made him a bishop of a church, and they forced you into Christianity and into Catholicism. So Nicanor came to Jerusalem with a large force and treacherously sent to Judas and his brethren this peaceable message: let there be no fighting between me and you. I shall come with a few men to see you face to face in peace. So he came to Judas, and they greeted one another peaceably. But the enemy were ready to seize Judas. It became known to Judas that Nicanor had come to him with treacherous intent, and he was afraid of him and would not meet him again. When Nicanor learned that his plan had been disclosed, he went out to meet Judas in battle near Kephar Salama. About 500 men of the army of Nicanor fell, and the rest fled into the city of David. After these events, Nicanor went up to Mount Zion, right here again. Some of the priests came out of the sanctuary, and some of the elders of the people, to greet him peaceably and to show him the burnt offerings that was being offered for the king. But he mocked them and derided them and defiled them and spoke arrogantly. And in anger, he swore his oath: unless Judah and his army are delivered into my hands this time, then if I return safely, I will burn up this house. And he went out in great anger. Then the priests went in and stood before the altar and the temple, and they wept and said, thou didst choose this house to be called by thy name, and to be for thy people a house of prayer and supplication. Take vengeance on this man and on his army, and let them fall by the sword. Remember their blasphemy, and let them live no longer. Now Nicanor went out from Jerusalem and encamped in Beth Horon, and the Syrian army joined him. And Judas encamped in Edessa with 3,000 men. Then Judas prayed and said, when the messengers from the king spoke blasphemy, thy angel went forth and struck down 185,000 of the Assyrians. So also crush this army before us today. Let the rest learn that Nicanor has spoken wickedly against the sanctuary, and judge him according to his wickedness. So the armies met in battle on the 13th day of the month of Adar. The army of Nicanor was crushed, and he himself was the first to fall in battle. When his army saw that Nicanor had fallen, they threw down their arms and fled. The Jews pursued them a day's journey from Edessa as far as Gazera, and as they followed, kept sounding the battle call on the trumpets. And men came out of all villages of Judea around about, and they went out, flanked the enemy, and drove them back to their pursuers, so that they all fell on the sword. Not even one of them was left. Then the Jews seized the spoils and the plunder, and they cut off Nicanor's head and the right hand which he so arrogantly stretched out, and bought them and displayed them just outside Jerusalem. The people rejoiced greatly and celebrated that day as a day of great gladness. And they decreed that this day should be celebrated each year on the 13th day of Adar. So the land of Judah had rest for a few years. oh, Lord, I better stop. But now we're getting into, I guess, the Romans. The Roman Empire was coming in. So anyway, I'm not going to read all this part. It's too much to read. I'll come back and read that. Try to read a little bit of it, though. Now, Judas heard of the fame of the Romans. The Romans are the fourth empire to rule over us. And they are to be the last. So Judas heard of the fame of the Romans, that they were very strong and were well disposed toward all who made an alliance with them, that they pledged friendship to those who came to them. Now, I want you to know why the Romans were risen up against us. Remember, it said we had a lot of lawless and wicked men, and how one of the wicked men among us had let somebody make him a high priest. Does that happen? That a foreigner would make you a high priest in the Most High's temple? Anyway, let me continue. That they pledged friendship to those who came to them, and that they were very strong. Men told him of their wars and of their brave deeds which they were doing among the Gauls, Gauls, how they had defeated them and forced them to pay tribute, and what they had done in the land of Spain to get control of the silver and gold mines there, and how they had gained control over the whole region by their planning and patience, even though the place was far distant from them. They also subdued the king who came against them from the ends of the earth until they crushed them and inflicted great disaster upon them. The rest paid them tribute every year. Philip and Perseus, king of the Macedonians, and the others who rose up against them, they crushed them in battle and conquered. They also defeated Antiochus, the great king of Asia, who went to fight against them with 120 elephants and with cavalry and chariots and a very large army. He was crushed by them. They took him alive and decreed that he and those who should reign after him should pay a heavy tribute, and gave hostages and surrendered some of their best provinces. The country of India and Media and Lydia, these they took from him and gave to Emenos, the king. The Greeks planned to come and destroy them, but this became known to them, and they sent a general against the Greeks and attacked them. Many of them were wounded and fell, and the Romans took captive their wives and children. They plundered them, conquered the land, tore down their strongholds, and enslaved them to this day. The remaining kingdoms of the islands is as many as ever opposed them. They destroyed and enslaved. These are the descendants who we are under today. But with their friends and those who rely on them, they have kept friendships. They had subdued kings far and near, and as many as have heard of their fame have feared them. Those whom they wish to help and to make kings, they make kings, and those whom they wish they dispose, and they have been greatly exalted. Yet for all this one, not one of them has put on a crown or worn purple as a mark of pride, but they have built for themselves a senate chamber, and every day 320 senators constantly deliberate concerning the people to govern them well. They trust one man each year to rule over them and to control all their lands. They all heed the one man, and there is no envy or jealousy among them. So Judah chose Eupolamus, the son of John, son of Achus, and Jason, the son of Eleazar, and sent them to Rome to establish friendships and allegiance, and to free themselves from the yoke. For they saw that the kingdom of the Greeks was completely enslaving Israel, the Hebrews. They went to Rome, a very long journey, and they entered the Senate's chambers and spoke as follows. Judas, who is also called Maccabeus, and his brethren and the people of the Jews have sent us to you to establish alliances. And here we go, establishing alliances and peace with you, that we may be enrolled as your allies and friends. This is our people. The proposal pleased them, and this is a copy of the letter which they wrote in reply on bronze tablets and sent to Jerusalem to remain with them there as a memorial of peace and alliance. May all go well with the Romans and with the nation of the Jews at sea and on land forever. And may sword and enemy be far from them. If war comes first to Rome or to any of their allies in all their dominion, don't you see the mistake here? The nation of the Jews shall act as their allies wholeheartedly, as the occasion may indicate to them. And to the enemy who makes war, they shall not give or supply grains, arms, money, or ships, as Rome has decided, and they shall keep their obligations without receiving any return. In the same way, if war comes first to the nation of the Jews, the Romans shall willingly act as their allies, as the occasion may indicate to them. And to the enemy allies shall be given no grain, arms, money, or ships, as Rome has decided, and they shall keep these obligations and do so without deceit. Thus, on these terms, the Romans make a treaty with the Jewish people, with the Hebrew people, with our people. If after these terms are in effect, both parties shall determine to add or delete anything, they shall do so at their discretion, and any additions or deletions that they may make shall be valid. And concerning the wrongs which King Demetrius is doing to them, we have written to him as follows. Why have you made your yoke heavy upon our friends and our allies as Jews? If now they appeal again for help against you, we will defend their rights and fight you on the sea and on the land. When Demetrius heard that Nicanor and his army had fallen in battle, he sent Bacchadas and Elasimus into the land of Judah a second time, and with them the right wing of the army. They went by the road which led to Gilgal and encamped against Mesolos in Arbela, and they took it and killed many people. In the first month of the 152nd year, they encamped against Jerusalem. Then they marched off and went to Beerira with 20,000 foot soldiers and 2,000 cavalry. Now Judah was encamped in Elasa, and with him were 3,000 picked men. When they saw the huge number of the enemy forces, they were greatly frightened, and many slipped away from the camp until no more than 800 of them were left. When Judah saw that his army had slipped away and the battle was imminent, he was crushed in spirit, for he had no time to assemble them. He became faint, but he said to those who were left, let us rise and go up against our enemies. We may be able to fight them. But they tried to dissuade him, saying, we are not able. Let us rather save our own lives now, and let us come back with our brethren and fight them. We are too few. But Judah said, Far be it from us to do such a thing as to flee from them. If our time has come, let us die bravely for our brethren and leave no cause to question our honor. Then the army of Maccabeus marched out from the camp and took its stand for the encounter. The cavalry was divided into two companies, and the slingers and the archers went ahead of the army, as did all the chief warriors. Maccabeus was on the right wing, flanked by the two companies, the Phalanx, Phalanx, advanced to the sound of the trumpets, and the men with Judas also blew their trumpets. The earth was shaken by the noise of the armies, and the battles raged from morning till evening. Judas saw that Maccabeus and the strength of his army were on the right. Then all the stout-hearted men went with him, and they crushed the right wing, and he pursued them as far as Mount Azotus. When those on the left wing saw that the right wing was crushed, they turned and followed close behind Judas and his men. The battle became desperate, and many on both sides were wounded and fell. Judas also fell, and the rest fled. Then Jonathan and Simon took Judas, their brother, and buried him in the tomb of their father at Modian, and wept for him. And all of Israel made great lamentation for him. They mourned many days and said, "How is the mighty fallen, the Savior of Israel?" Now the rest of the acts of Judas and his wars and the brave deeds that he did and his greatness have not been recorded, for they were very many. After the death of Judas, the lawless emerged in all parts of Israel. All the doers of injustice appeared. In those days, a very great famine occurred, and the country deserted with them to the enemy. Maccabeus chose the ungodly and put them in charge of the country. They sought and searched for the friends of Judas and brought them into Maccabeus, and he took vengeance on them and made sport of them. Thus there was great distress in Israel, such as had not been since the time that the prophet ceased to appear among them. Then all the friends of Judas assembled and said to Jonathan, "Since the death of your brother Judas, there has been no one like him to go against our enemies and Maccabeus, and to deal with those of our nation who hate us. So now we have chosen you today to take his place as our ruler and leader to fight our battles." And Jonathan at that time accepted the leadership and took the place of Judas, his brother. Then Maccabeus learned of this. He tried to kill him. But Jonathan and Simeon, his brother, and all who were with him heard of it, and they fled into the wilderness of Tekoa and camped by the water of the pool of Asphar. Maccabeus found this out on the Sabbath day, and he with all his armies crossed the Jordan. And Jonathan sent his brother as leader of the multitude and begged the Nabateans, who were his friends, for permission to store with them the great amount of baggage which they had. But the sons of Jambri from Madeba came out and seized John and all that he had and departed with it. And I'm going to really stop right here because it's too much to read. And I've read almost half of chapter 1, it looks like, and it's about as much of what I read that's left. All right, that's enough for me. Until next time, Dana Tate, the Maccabees, first Maccabees.